Want to creep out and scare the neighbor's children this Halloween? Why not give corpsing a try? Corpsing is a great way to turn that ordinary, boring skeleton into something grotesque and disturbing. Start by acquiring a skeleton. Place your skeleton on a tarp for easier cleanup. If you'd like your skeleton to have more body mass or more fleshy bits, like the fleshy bits that are underneath the skin, fat, viscera, etc., a great way to do this is by using some spray foam to fill out your skeleton. Viscera. When the spray foam dries, it's easy and fun to carve it down to your desired shape. At this point, you can stain the skeleton and spray foam if you like. This step is optional. I chose to stain everything at this point in time in hopes that it would create or add more depth to the corpse when I was finished. That is also a disturbing statement. Next, you're going to want to grab some plastic, whether it's plastic wrap or plastic drop cloths like I used. You will need some kind of plastic. I feel like something like a tarp obviously is not going to work as well. I have read from some other people who have done this online that they have used some of the thicker drop cloths and they did also work for this. Whatever you are using, you will need to wrap your skeleton/corpse in plastic. Please wear a respirator and work in a well-ventilated area for the next part. At the very least, work in a well-ventilated area, because it's gonna get stanky. Take a heat gun and start melting the plastic over the skeleton, and you will need a heat gun for this. A hairdryer is not going to provide enough heat for this next step, so you will want something that gets super hot. And because it's going to get super hot, you're going to want to be very careful with this. The heat will sort of shrink wrap the plastic around the skeleton, and it will smell, hence the respirator and well-ventilated area. I made the mistake of doing this in my basement, not my garage, and I really should have moved it out to the garage when I was staining and melting the plastic. I ended up throwing up a bunch of fans around in the area and opening up the windows, especially when I was staining. The stain I was using was an oil-based stain, and she made me a little lightheaded. I had to go sit on the deck for a bit. But yeah, well-ventilated area, respirator, protect yourself. Better be safe today than sorry tomorrow. Then continue to add plastic and melt it over the skeleton/corpse until you're happy. The longer you apply heat to the plastic, it will melt the plastic and create holes in certain areas. And this can be desirable depending on the effects that you want to create on your corpse. Keep in mind that the heat gun is hot and will not only melt the plastic, but whatever else is underneath, including the tarp. When you are happy with your skeleton corpse's newly acquired flesh, it's time to add the finishing touches. Use a stain to cover the surface of the skin. I used the color red oak. I also used an oil-based stain. If you can help it, try to find a water-based stain. It will most likely be less stinky and it might take less time to dry. This is just a theory because you're putting stain on plastic and the plastic isn't actually absorbing the stain. So for mine, it was an oil-based stain and it sat on the surface for quite a while and was tacky for a long time after staining. Also, after I had stained my skeleton, I did go back in with the heat gun and melt more areas and added in more stain in certain spots just to enhance a few of the areas. And I used an espresso stain at this point as well to help with this step. Like I said, I ran into some issues with my stain not drying very fast, which is why I think that a water-based stain might be a better option. Eventually, days later, the stain did dry, although I did help the process along by spraying it with a sealant in my garage. My hope was that the sealant would expedite the drying process, and it actually did. It ended up getting rid of a lot of the tackiness and basically made it so it was dry within a few hours rather than waiting longer. However, I had let the oil-based stain dry for a considerable amount of time before I sprayed it with the sealant. This was just my last-ditch effort in hopes that I could make the whole thing less sticky. Again, because it's a stain that's primarily made for wood, and I was applying it to plastic. Kind of a no-brainer that it's not going to absorb into the plastic like it would if you applied it to a wood surface. So it was just sort of sticky and sitting on the surface of the plastic. But yeah, like I said, the sealant actually worked out pretty well, and it was not sticky after a while, and I could touch it and move it around without getting stain all over my hands. Now, if you follow these steps at least 50% perfectly, you will have your very own ghoulish, corpseified skeleton to scare away everyone in your neighborhood. I mean, scare away the children on Halloween. I mean, scare the children on Halloween. Yeah, that's it. I'm genuinely curious if you would try this project at home to create your own corpseified skeleton. It was a lot of fun, and I did experiment a little bit on another skeleton just using the plastic without the spray foam underneath and spray paint. I wanted to see if spray paint would work. Yes, I feel like it doesn't create the same amount of depth as the stain did in certain areas. Like, it doesn't build up in spots, and depending how good you are with spray paint, you can create an interesting look with the plastic wrap and spray paint. However, the spray foam, adding the spray foam step just made it so much grosser underneath. Like, everyone I showed these pictures to was genuinely disturbed by this corpseified skeleton. And my husband had brought my son down to the basement one day, and he didn't tell him I had this thing set up and sitting on the floor. And my son walked down and was just kind of like, do, and then he looks over and he's like, oh God, like, what is that? So yeah, be prepared. It is gross. I genuinely think that you should actually try this. It was a lot of fun. And if you do mess it up, I'll show you how to turn your ruined corpse into a cocoon body next time on Total Pamarchy. Until then, bye. Part of that should be good. Cut. What'd you think, Fred? Yeah,